Okay, we are recording. Okay, so welcome to the first live check-in of the Declutter Your Budget Challenge. So we are going to be doing 4 of these. So this is Friday nights, then we're going to do Monday, Wednesday, and next Friday. So those are all the check-in days, and I made events on Facebook, and I'll be sending them out in the emails, so you don't have to worry too much. I'll remind you about them. And there will be access to replays. You'll get all of the replays, so don't worry. And if you have questions and you're not able to join one of the lives, just reply to any of the emails, and I'm going to be checking those emails every day throughout the challenge so I can stay on top of all of your questions. And I'm going to be even more present in my inbox and my Facebook group than I normally am, especially during this 8-day challenge, because I want to be there for you guys. And I know how when you have a question, sometimes it can kind of hold up your progress. And so I want to try to stay on top of that as much as I can. Obviously, bear with me. I do have 3 children. But, so let me know if you have questions throughout this. That's what this is for. I'm not going to take a lot of your time on these live check-ins. They're for you. They're not necessarily for me to reteach everything that you just heard in day 1's lesson, which is why I did those recorded, so I didn't have to say all the same things a million times. But I think it is important to have live check-ins because I feel like it holds us even more accountable. And I know for me personally, that was something that I lacked in the beginning of my journey, was someone to hold me accountable. I didn't know that there were really people that blogged about this. The debt-free community on Instagram literally did not exist. I had no personal friends, no one in my family that was doing this. And even my husband, when he finally was on board, he was kind of just like, okay, cool. He didn't, obviously he didn't have any advice for me when we first started. So that it was something that was really important to me that I want to bring to y'all. And that is why doing something like this challenge is so important, because I feel like it holds us even more accountable. And if we are doing this challenge consistently 8 days in a row and we see progress after a week, I mean, we're going to be so motivated, so pumped up, and we're going to continue to make further progress. So that's why I think it's really important. And that's why I want to make sure to check in with you guys at least 4 times throughout this 8-day challenge. So those of you who are here live, pop your questions in, or let me know if you would rather speak your question. I don't know if that's awkward or not, but I'm all about being awkward, so. But let me know if you guys have questions. I do have an emailed question. So let me see. So the most awkward thing, totally off topic, a little bit of why I'm so flustered right now, is that my new computer that I just got last week only has 2 USB ports. What is up with that? And my mouse is USB, my mic is USB, and my camera is USB, which, if you can do math, that's 3 things with 2 USB ports. So I'm I have to use this little touchpad thing to do my mouse, and I'm not sure what I'm doing. Oh, that's because I'm on the wrong tab. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I did have a question that was emailed into me from Michelle, and I want to make sure to answer her question. So I'll do that first off, and then those of you who are here, let me know what you thought about day 1. Let me know, if you have any questions, anything you want to share, anything like that. So Michelle's asking, she's saying that her biggest challenges are seasonal and unpredictable incomes. So they have 3 different self-run businesses, and they're trying to figure out if they'll have enough money from, both of their expenses, and they're feeling frustrated with all of the variable bills. So a lot of us will probably understand that. And she's saying that they get paralyzed every time that they sit down and they try to figure it out. And they are truly, they're feeling kind of desperate because they've been carrying credit card debt, due to some unpredictable things like medical bills and things like that, car repairs and things like that. So yeah, I think that that's something that a lot of us experience, and we're actually going to be covering that a little more in, which day will we be covering that? We will be going more, we'll be going more into it. And whenever we're going to talk a little bit about it when we're talking about organizing your accounts, and things like that. But basically, the best solution for this is sinking funds. And you guys might have heard me preach about sinking funds before. And the difference between a sinking fund and an emergency fund or a savings account is that an emergency fund is for something that you literally can't predict. So that is something like your car like breaks down. That is something like you lose your job, or something that you just don't know is going to happen. That's an emergency. A sinking fund is for things that you know are going to happen eventually. You might not know when or exactly how much. It's kind of more of that gray area. So for example, my personal sinking funds, and one of my goals for 2020 with my budget was to simplify my sinking funds, which is literally what I was doing last night. I was in the new worksheets, and I was going in and I was like setting up my sinking funds and simplifying them and figuring all that out. And so I have things like holidays, my girls' is holidays, actually. I call it girls' holidays. And it's everything from all 3 of their birthdays to Halloween, Easter, things like that I would spend money on them specifically. And then there's a sinking fund for the girls' activities. So this is anything from our homeschool group, dance class expenses, which is a lot of expenses, soccer, anything like that, any of their activities. And then I also have like a sinking fund for Christmas. And I also have a sinking fund for medical bills. And I have another one for vehicle repairs. And vehicle repairs is anything from my Suburban, my husband's truck, our camper, or our boat. So any of those are constituted as vehicle repairs, and maintenance type things. So what you can do is you can look ahead to say, okay, I know, for example, my oldest daughter's birthday is coming out of the next pay period. And so I know I am budgeting $150 for her birthday. So it's $150. I know that I can just kind of like take that out of our leftover money. Okay, that's fine. So I can do a sinking fund, which means that I can divide it up over all of the pay periods. We have 17 pay periods this year, and I could divide that $150 over 17 pay periods, from the pay period after her birthday to the pay period when I'm going to need her birthday money, and I could, trickle $10 in every single pay period. And that's like initially what sinking fund means, is you're sinking that money in little by little by little, right? And so with vehicle repairs and maintenance, I'm going to do, I think I did 1,500, and there were 17 pay periods, and we had a pay period yesterday, and I wasn't prepared to do that part of the sinking fund yet, and I didn't want to do the last one. So I simplified it into 15 pay periods, $1,500, $100 every single pay period is going to be sunk into an account, which means transferred into a debit card account specifically for all of this. And then it is organized on my spreadsheet, right? So Vicki said I need to simplify my sinking funds too. I think I misunderstand what is exactly in which is why I have 17. Yeah. So the new worksheets was really funny, was when Megan and I were developing the worksheets. We started with, I sent her I sent her my actual budget, and we cleaned it up. And she's like, okay, you are like repeating a lot of things. You're overcomplicating a lot of things. And I'm like, yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell. And so I had like a list of sinking funds, and I literally had like a bucket for every single, like I had a bucket for Izzy's birthday, a bucket for June's birthday, like its own sinking fund, like its own little spot on the spreadsheet. And she's like, why don't you just do like all of the girls' birthdays as one bucket, as one line item? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm over, like I'm making it too complicated. But I went from, years ago, not having anything, not being prepared for this kind of stuff at all. So, and then I kind of overdid it, kind of like what Vicky's saying is like, I made it too complicated because I wanted to have every single detail. But it was way better to have it overdone, like Vicky's saying, and like mine was, than not have it at all. So it's not going to be perfect. Obviously, mine isn't even perfect, but the point is that the money's there when I need it. So that's ultimately what matters. You can always clean it up and simplify it later or next year or whatever. So things like medical bills and things like that, like what Michelle was asking, I would do sinking funds. And there's not 100% way to know it, to know if it's going to be perfect. And I always say your first year, even your first 2 years, it's going to be a good try. And it might take to the second or third year for you to get it down. And honestly, this is only our third year doing sinking funds because I didn't start really doing sinking funds until after we were debt free. I would just try to put it in my spending money or try to pull from my emergency fund, when I needed things. So really this is only my third year doing it. And like I said, I'm just now really getting the hang of mine and simplifying it. So don't let that stop you from doing things like this. And also to kind of further answer part of Michelle's question, and I've been getting this a lot, so I think I'm going to do a podcast episode about people who have self-run businesses or their income varies or commission-based, things like that. I feel like I've been getting that question more lately than normal. But my answer to that always is save. And it is the key to that is to get a paycheck ahead, which I know is sometimes like easier said than done. But that should be your first goal, is to get a pay period ahead. So you're not constantly playing catch up. And then also to have that emergency fund as a buffer when you have a low sales period or whatever. And to basically make sure that you're writing out your budget so you make sure to know what is coming up, to be prepared. And I think a lot of people will use that as an excuse. Well, I'm self-employed, or we work on commission. It just won't work for me. And I think a lot of us will use that as a crutch to kind of rest on, and we can't do that. That's not an excuse. Your budget might just be a little more complicated than somebody else's. And y'all might have heard me use the example of our personal example. What held us back for all those years, the first 5 years of our marriage, was my husband's pay schedule is so crazy. We literally, the paycheck that we got yesterday only has to last us 2 weeks. And then the one we get in 2 weeks has to last us 4 weeks, and so on and so on and so on. It's 2 and 4 and 2 and 4. And it's insane. But I got my hands on it and I got in there and I figured it out. I wrote it out. I made spreadsheets. I did it over and over and I figured it out, is what I'm saying. And so, no, it wasn't always pretty. Yes, it started on a scratch piece of printer paper, and I cleaned it up and cleaned it up and cleaned it up. And now we are to where we are. But I figured it out. And no one's budget is going to be exactly the same. But that's not really an excuse. So yours just might be a little more complicated than the person next to you, but that's how it goes sometimes. So what else, guys? What did you guys think of day one? Let me know. I went back. So spoiler alert, these videos, if any one of you is going through the challenge for the second time, this is the second time I've done this challenge. And the original lessons, the videos that you're watching, are the original videos. Like I didn't redo those. So when I was preparing to redo this challenge, I went back and I watched all the old videos and I was like, they're good. There's no reason to redo them. So I'm also kind of going through the challenge with you guys because I'm rewatching them and figuring all that out again. So yeah, so for day one, really, and I say this all the time, that the most important thing to do is to start with the mindset and to think of it as that laying that foundation. And there's no point in going forward in the challenge if you're not ready to deal with the mindset that got you into this mess in the first place, right? So it is a mind thing, and every single part of our life, not just your budget, the mind is the first thing that you have to work on. So we have to deal with those little bits of mental and emotional clutter, the things that are, you know, the shopping addictions, the going out to eat because you're bored, or whatever it is, the impulse buying, all of that, whatever it is, anything unhealthy having to do around your money, we have to deal with that. We have to bring that to life and work through that. Obviously, that's not something that you can do between now and 9 a.m. tomorrow when you get day 2, but it is something, it is going to give you something to think on. It is going to give you something to work through when you are, you know, journaling, praying, meditating, having your quiet time, talking it out with your partner, talking it out with your best friend, things like that. So Tiffany says, I'm still working on the negative and positive brain flow part. Yeah. I have at least finished my why. I love that. That's so great. I think that the why is the most important part. And I think that the reason why the why is the most important part, because that is what you will go back to when you want to quit, right? And I do this all the time. It's not easy for any of us. And I have my times. My husband has his times. Sometimes we have our times at the same time. And that's when it gets really, really, really sketchy. But for example, right before Christmas, I kind of had one of those moments, but with the business, with doing everything that I do with you guys. And I kind of just had this moment where I was like, why, you know, and I was just kind of in a bad headspace about it. And I was really burnt out and I was overwhelmed with Christmas, and, you know, I'm a normal person. And my husband's like, well, what will happen if you quit? And so we went through that whole, well, you know, I wouldn't have a creative outlet. I wouldn't have the connections that I've built. I would, you know, and all this. So I think it's really important to ask yourself, what would happen if you quit? You know, and what do you have? What potential could be lost if you quit? And also, like, why did you start in the first place? And that was another thing he asked me. He's like, why did you start doing this in the first place? Because obviously you don't have to do this. You chose to do this. And I'm like, well, you know, I just had this idea. I had this passion and I wanted to share it. And he is like, and if you quit now, what would happen? And I'm like, I would be bored and like there would be no creative outlet for that passion. And he's like, exactly. So you're not going to quit. Right. So that's kind of the same thing with our money. What happens if you quit? We stay right where we are, as stuck as we feel right now, or worse. Like, if you think now is bad, what if it got worse? And I'm not someone to like let the negative fuel you. I'm not someone to let the fear fuel you. But also, we can learn a lot from those negatives. We can learn a lot from those fears, and we can flip those negatives and those fears into something positive, into something motivating. And we might have to reword them. It might take a little bit for us to kind of flip our brain into that, you know, well, I don't want to be broke. That's like a very common why. I don't want to struggle anymore. Well, you're putting the word broke, you're putting the word struggle in that why, which is a decent place to start. Don't get me wrong. And if that's where your brain flow goes, that's perfectly normal. But we don't want our why to have struggle and broke in it, right? We want it to have it. Well, I want to build wealth. I want to be generous. I want to live in peace, you know, and see how I'm putting like the positive words on it. And it's completely normal and human to first be like, well, I don't want to be broke anymore. You know, that's completely normal. So, you know, so Vicky says, I feel that my mindset as it pertains to money is good. What I struggle with sometimes is comparison. Yes. We do spend a little bit of money on things to help us not feel deprived, but not big ticket items. Yeah. It also is hard to have a budget mentality in this society. It is, exactly. And I struggle with the same thing. And I struggle with, you know, the comparison is so real. And gosh, yeah, to not feel deprived. And I work through that with like the small wins, like you're saying, like it's okay to do the small wins, but it is hard with the big ticket items. And I think that's something that you'll grow, like you grow into that. And it's something that becomes easier and easier. And you can't expect to go from the paycheck to paycheck to cash flowing like $20,000 vehicles. That's a huge, like you're skipping, you know, 20 or 30 steps. And I think whenever we think, well, I'm not cash flowing those vehicles yet. I'm not to that level yet. I must be doing something wrong. You're comparing someone else's step 50 to your step 2, right? And that's just, you know, that's not accurate at all. And I even feel the same way. I see there's so many people that I follow on Instagram, even in the debt-free community, that I look up to for motivation. And I see people who are my age, who are already millionaires, who are like cash flowing rental properties, who are doing all these things. And I'm like, I'm not to their level yet. And I fall into that comparison trap. But 5-10 years ago, I would have looked at somebody who's where I am and I would have been like, I'm not to her level yet. I must be failing, right? So no matter what level you get to, and you can even, I interviewed Shung, gosh, it was forever ago on the podcast. I interviewed Shung, and she's one of those who, she's basically my age, in her 30s, mid 30s, and her husband are already multimillionaires. And I was so intimidated to interview her because I'm like, she went to Harvard. She's a multimillionaire. Like, she's legit, right? And I'm telling her this about comparing myself to her. She's one of my people that I look up to so much for her money habits. And she's like, yeah, but what you don't understand is I look up to so-and-so who's like a billionaire or a multi-millionaire. And I feel like I'm not living up to what she's doing. So my point is that there's always going to be someone. So try to use that comparison, not in a negative way, but as a goals, like goals. I will be there. I'll be there in a few steps. She's just a few steps ahead of me. That's cool. I can look to her for inspiration, right? But yeah, I think that with the spending on the big ticket items, that's a muscle that's going to have to grow. And we're kind of working on that now. I had mentioned a few months ago that I wanted to go on a cruise. I've never been on a cruise. And a friend of mine takes her kids all the time on cruises. And I'm just like, I want to do that. That's goals to me. And I want to do that. And I want to be brave enough to like take my kids when my husband's at work and like do this thing. And so my husband actually asked me last night, he's like, so have you thought any more about your cruise? Like where you want to go, when you want to go, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I mean, not really. And he's like, you're not backing out of this. And I said, well, it's really the money. Like, I don't want to spend that much money on myself. That's a perfect example of that muscle has to grow. So I'm getting to the point where I'm out of survival mode enough that I'm like, I can see myself going on that cruise and like cash flowing that cruise, but I'm still building that muscle. But then again, when we bought our new boat a few months ago, it was so easy. Like I was just like, here's the money, let's go. Like that part, that muscle's growing, but spending it on something I want to do only, that's a little trickier. Yes. You're so welcome, Vicky. But yeah, I think the comparison thing, like that is just toxic. And I felt like the more that I distance myself from the people who make me feel that way, the better. Obviously, you don't want to live like under a rock. You don't want to completely alienate the entire world. But when you start to get those kind of like those little pings of envy, those little bits of comparison, distance yourself from that person, that thing, whatever it is for a little while, and, really like refocus on your goals. So let's see, what else? I'll talk for just a few more minutes. I want to try to keep these around 30 minutes. So I feel like especially for people who are watching the replay, if they see like an hour-long video, they're going to be like, no, I'm good. So yeah, I just want to remind you guys that like this part of the challenge isn't to be taken lightly. It isn't to be skipped. It is really the time to have a heart-to-heart with yourself. And I know that it's not something that you can necessarily sit down and do in 5 minutes, but we are, as we are going, as part of the reason why I started this challenge on a Friday, as we're going into the weekend, you'll have a little bit of extra time over the weekend to set that time aside. So I want to challenge you to do that as you are going into this challenge. Get it? It is a challenge, right? And I want to challenge you to make sure to work through that heart to heart with yourself. So let me know if you guys have any other questions or comments that you want to add. And let me know as you're going throughout the challenge, anything that comes up. And I'm really excited to see you guys move forward. Let's see. So Tiffany, did you have any questions on the part that you're still working through, or is it just like got to take the time to sit down and do it? Working on the negative and positive brain flow. See if I had anything else that I wanted to mention. Okay. Yeah. No question. Just have to figure it all out. Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of it is we just gotta set the time aside to kind of work through it. And like I say, I think I said that in the actual video lesson, as you might not have enough space in that little workbook. But I wanted it to be there so you would know that it is important to do it. So you might have to bust out with a full-blown journal or the notes in your phone. Sometimes the notes in my phone are better than a journal. And sometimes I will even like audio, like voice text into the notes in my phone. And I'll just like talk to myself, and my kids think I'm crazy, but whatever. Or sometimes like if I'm on a walk or I'm outside, I'm just like sitting on the porch or something, and it's just easier for me to text that down in my notes and kind of just get it out and, go back and reread it and everything. So yeah. Okay. So we are going to, over the weekend, you are going to be getting emails for organizing your paperwork, which I also thought would be a good one for a Saturday, and establishing your rhythms for Sunday, which would also be good going into the new week. So maybe you can start Monday kind of on a fresher new rhythm kind of thing. So, so we'll be working on organizing your paperwork and establishing your rhythms. And then Monday, everyone's favorite, organizing your accounts. And that's such a popular topic. That's my most popular YouTube video, my most popular podcast episode. So I'm really excited. I'm always excited to talk about that because that's always a lot of like light bulb moments when we get to organizing your accounts for people. So I will be back Monday at 8 p.m. Central to talk to you guys again. And let me know, like save your questions if you have questions and you're going to join me live, or if you can't join live, pop them into an email so I can answer them live for you, because sometimes it's just better to hear and see me answer your questions. Sometimes it's easier for me to answer them than just trying to email, because I feel like that there's something always lost in translation there. So that is all. I will let you guys go. I will go check on my children. And yes, Vicki, have a great weekend. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for hanging out live, and let me know if you guys have any questions as you go into the weekend. Okay. All right. Bye, guys.